So this screencast is intended to sort of quickly summarize what happens in the Peloponnesian War and the end of Athens' golden age. And it happens in what we call the late 4th century BCE, 5th century BCE, 431 to 403 BCE. And that really coincides with the Peloponnesian Wars, which take, almost 3 decades to complete. Sparta and Athens had been rivals for centuries, quite literally. And the rivalry comes to a head in these Peloponnesian Wars and really doesn't end Athens as a city forever and all time, but ends the classical age or the golden age of Athens. Basically what happens is that Athens becomes aggressive with Corinth and Megara in the middle of the 5th century BCE. Corinth we've heard of before. Megara is a new name for us. But Athens becomes aggressive, sort of seeking to expand its economic influence into the Peloponnesian Peninsula. And this ends a treaty between the two city-states being Athens and Sparta. Athens picks a fight with Sparta's allies, and Sparta comes to the rescue. Sparta demands Athens ease restrictions on its allies, trade restrictions and things like that. The Athenian assembly, you remember the assembly under the leadership of Pericles, we read the funeral oration of Pericles, the same Pericles, refuses to compromise with the Spartans, signaling to the Spartans that war is imminent. So the Spartans attack by going across the mountains in the Peloponnese and invading Athenian territory. Pericles realizes that the navy, once again, the navy being the strongest aspect of the Athenian military, saying, we're not going to pick a fight with Sparta's infantry, so we're going to dig in and fight the Spartans on sea with naval raids. And the Athenians resisted fighting the Sparta's infantry even after Spartan hoplites, remember the hoplite soldiers, plundered the Athenian countryside. So Pericles is saying, and the Athenian military said, we're not going to fight Sparta on their turf. We're going to fight them on our turf. And even was okay, their turf being a naval battle. It was even okay with some Athenian countryside getting sacked. Things were looking okay until 429 BCE. Pericles died, and leadership that followed him was not very good. And a plague struck Athens, and this is one of the unfortunate kind of quirks of history. Would Athens have won these wars had the plague not struck? We'll never know, but quite likely. After Pericles died, the Athenians became very aggressive with Sparta and decided to invade Sicily, which is to the west, far to the west, and it was an ally of Sparta. It's far to the west of the Peloponnese, and the Athenian navy was devastated. So they're not going to beat the Spartans on land, and their navy is devastated in a naval battle. Basically what happens is that Athens really falls apart. Alcibiades is a name of an Athenian commander who decides to defect to Sparta after he gets thrown overboard by some of his political rivals in the assembly. And we don't need to know tremendous detail. What we need to know is that Athens falls apart politically as well as militarily. In the very late 5th century, Alcibiades, remember who was Athenian, turns and has turned to Spartan, gives advice to attack the mining industry, the agricultural industry of Athens in the countryside, destroying their economic base. And finally, Persia comes in on the side of Sparta, helps them build a navy, and destroys Athens finally. One of the interesting side notes is that Sparta refuses to physically destroy Athens, because too much respect for Athens and the role they had played in defeating the Persians all those years before in the Persian Wars. Sparta decides to institute an anti-democratic oligarchy in Athens. And it's this anti-democratic oligarchy in Athens that ultimately puts Socrates to death. Interesting stuff there, the connection. So just taking a quick look at the map, we see that you really couldn't be too neutral. There was some neutrality, but Athens' allies, Sparta's allies, right? You kind of on one side or the other, almost like the Cold War of the US and the USSR. We look at this map here, we see very similar kind of layout. Athens, Sparta, here's Corinth. And these two maps really kind of show us sort of the lay of the land in the Aegean. Now, what we want to be sure we understand is not necessarily the battles and who attacked whom, where, but rather that the outcome of the Peloponnesian Wars was the defeat of Athens, the devastation of Athens, and the destruction of democracy in Athens. The enormous weakening of Athens leaves the door open for the Macedonians and King Philip. King Philip is the one who ultimately invades southward and takes a lot of this area of Greece and this area of Greece and puts it under his control, develops a Macedonian kingdom, and it's this Macedonian kingdom that Alexander the Great inherits. So the Peloponnesian Wars, we're doing an abbreviated version of the Peloponnesian Wars. What we're mostly interested in is not just what happened, but also what were the outcomes of the Peloponnesian Wars. The major outcome, again, is the destruction of Athens as the most important city-state in the region.